Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. It's a pleasure for me to come your way again this Friday, and you are welcome to Living in the Digital World series. As I mentioned, my name is Florence Topher, and I'm joining you from the American corner at Boba, and I am the director of Mobile Web Ghana. And as I mentioned, American Corner Gbogbo is part of the American spaces we have around the world. American spaces provide access to current and reliable information about the United States through book collections, internet access, events, and activities for everyone. And this activity is one of the events that we are bringing to you today. Today, we are discussing a very important topic, which is actors and techniques of misinformation and disinformation. Facilitating this session is Nathan Tete Gaduga, editor, Dubawa, Ghana. Nathan Gaduga is a strategist, a communication consultant, and presently the editor of Dubawa, Ghana. Dubawa is in so many countries, Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and the Gambia. He has over 2 decades of experience in the journalism and the media landscape, working in different media organizations, Ghana News Agency, Top Radio, Vibe FM, and the Multimedia Group, where he rose to become assistant editor at myjournalonline.com. He resigned from the group in 2018 after a little over a decade of service. Nathan then became the Director of Communications and Public Relations at the Royal Commonwealth Society, and later a senior partner at Ganyame Consult, a PR and communication firm. He joined Dubawa, the fact-checking arm of the Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development, in January 2022 as the editor, a position he still holds. He is a graduate of the Department of Communication Studies, University of Ghana, with a master's degree in communications. During the session, please feel free to post your comments in the comment box below and it will be addressed. Thank you for staying. And I now hand over the mic to Nathan Tete to take us through what he has for us today. Nathan, please take us through what you have for us today. Let's know the actors' techniques of misinformation and disinformation.
Okay, thank you so much, Florence. And I'm very humbled to be part of this space and to share my little knowledge and expertise on the actors and techniques of disinformation. I think it's an opportunity that quite a number of people would look forward to, and I'm very, very glad to be part of this. So let me just briefly talk about Dubawa, like you rightly mentioned. I'm sure quite a number of people who will be joining us probably do not have an idea what Dubawa is all about. Dubawa, like you rightly said, is the fact-checking arm of the Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development, which is headquartered in Nigeria. Dubawa, as an arm of CJID, is the fact-checking arm, and our sole responsibility is to combat issues of disinformation. So basically, when the opportunity came for me to have this session, I thought, well, this is well in line with what we have been doing at Dubawa. So I was really humbled and happy to engage you and engage our participants on this very important occasion. So without much ado, let me quickly zoom into our topic for today. Florence, I'm sure you can see it, right?
Yes, please, I can see your screen.
Okay.
You just put it in a slideshow mode and we are good to go.
Great. So we'll be talking today about the actors and techniques of mis and disinformation. Before we start, let's just look at the session for today and what we will be looking at. We'll find out who the agents and actors of mis or disinformation are. We'll check out their underlying motivations, why they do what they do. We would also look at the format it takes and how their mis or disinformation spreads. We would also look at how myself, yourself, would interpret some of the messages they put across, and generally the impact of information disorder within the information ecosystem. And more importantly, we would also be looking at how to deal with this animal, quote and unquote, we call mis and disinformation. Before we zoom in, can we do a little exercise? I would ask a question, and those who are monitoring us from wherever, whatever answer you have, just briefly put the answer within the chat box. Midway through the presentation, I'm sure we will get around it and have it to be a lot more engaging. Naturally, I would rather have a discussion, but this virtual presentation makes it a lot more difficult to have that interaction. So this question is to ensure that those who are monitoring us would participate and they would interact with myself on what we are discussing today. So the question is...
Nita, please, can you put your slides in a slideshow mode whilst we continue? Thank you.
Okay. Is it showing?
The slide is showing, but it's still showing as slides. So I think it's down where the, no, now it's not showing. So okay, you go ahead and then you do it as you were doing it, and then we can figure it out.
Okay, so is it okay?
It's okay. We'll figure it out.
Okay. So basically, as a participant who's monitoring me now, you read this message or this news item on a very credible website in Ghana, and it reads, the American Embassy is issuing free visa to Ghanaians on April 1, 2022 to consolidate bilateral relations between the two countries. This is a story, the lead of the story you have read on a very credible website. The question is, if you were to see this on any of the credible websites in Ghana, what will you do and why? So just type in the chat box what you would do after reading this news item on a credible website and why you would do what you do. I start this presentation off with this remarkable comment by Alexios Manzalis, who is an author and also with the IFCN. And he says, from politicians to marketers, from advocacy groups to brands, everyone who seeks to convince others has the incentive to distort, to exaggerate, or obfuscate the facts. This is more or less to trigger a healthy sense of suspicion in you, so that wherever you meet or read any information, you would not take that information on the face value. You would first have to think about it and understand what action you need to take. So simply put, don't take everything you see on social media or even on traditional media on face value. It doesn't matter who is saying it. You just have to be a lot more cautious in whatever you see. Now, what information disorder does? For us generally, for a good number of people, we call it fake news, but the experts within the information ecosystem would rather call it information disorder, and there are very good reasons why they would call it information disorder rather than fake news. So we probably, for the purpose of this presentation, be using those terminologies interchangeably, okay? So, and again, I'm sure a good number of people who are monitoring us may have an idea exactly what these concepts are, that is misinformation, malinformation, and disinformation. But for the purposes of those who are joining us for the first time, and those who do not have any idea what these concepts are, I'll just take a brief moment to take us through what misinformation is, what malinformation is, and what disinformation is. So basically, misinformation is an unintentional spread of false information with no motive to cause harm. The emphasis is an unintentional spread of false information with no intention to cause harm. And let me just give an example. So for instance, in the heat of COVID, we all read a number or received a number of messages that suggested that, okay, if you were to take this concoction, or if you were to take this, you probably won't get the COVID, okay? So you quickly spread or send this to a family member in order to protect him or her. It turns out that maybe that information is not true, but your intention of spreading that information is just to, as it were, save or help keep your family member healthy. You have no motive whatsoever to cause harm. You have no motive whatsoever to misinform. You just want to spread information you think is accurate just so you would save life. But it turns out that maybe that information is false. You are engaging in misinformation. Let me jump to disinformation. Disinformation is when you spread false information intentionally with a motive to cause harm. So the only difference between disinformation and misinformation is that for disinformation, you know what you are spreading is false and you want to cause harm. Generally, you want to manipulate the information environment and let people take actions based on your information that you have given to them, which is malicious, okay? So you put out false information with the intention to cause harm. Then we come to malinformation. Malinformation is when you spread any information, pictures, videos, etc., that is true. It actually happened, but maybe the context in which you are sharing it, or maybe the timing in which you are sharing it is wrong, basically to cause harm. So I give an example. I'm sure in the heat of the US election in 2016, we had lots of Hillary Clinton's private email messages being leaked here and there. That is one example of malinformation where somebody was spreading information that otherwise should have been kept private. Or maybe a couple who probably had something to do with each other and they recorded their activities, and somehow when they fell out, one of the couples decides to leak whatever videos they took of themselves in order to harm the other partner. So in that case, you are spreading a true information, but the context in which you are spreading it and the timing is wrong, and basically you want to cause harm to the person against whom you are sending that information, okay? And according to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, misinformation, as I've explained, basically misleads. Malinformation sabotages, and disinformation deceives. So you have these three toxic activities all playing out within the information ecosystem, and it behoves on you and I to read between the lines and see how these agents are misinforming or misleading people, sabotaging people, deceiving people, in order to take steps or actions to mitigate the impact of these agents. So basically, if you don't take anything home today at all, you just have to be cautious and know that there are unseen hands who are within the information ecosystem, who are trying to mislead, who are trying to sabotage, and who are trying to deceive. And the actions you take based on this information will determine whether you fall prey to the activities of these people or not. So who are these agents or actors? Basically, if we talk about the agents or actors, we are talking about the people who are engaged in the acts of misinformation and disinformation. And we have a couple of lists here. This list is by no means exhaustive. There are quite a number of others out there, but for the purposes of this presentation, we have limited ourselves to these individuals or institutions, okay?
Okay.
And we
So Nathan, before we go to the agents and actors of mis or disinformation, when you look down your slides, you see where the comment, there is a comment, and the last bar, there is something like an arrow. Just click on that. The slideshow will pop up.
Where?
On the last, down the slide itself, the bottom, you see comments down. Yes, and then you see after the comment, the last icon.
Hey, am I okay? I've seen comments.
Yes, so go here, the last one, not the notes, the last one. Yes, the
Okay,
other, yes,
one.
please click on that. Yes, please. Thank you, beautiful. We are online.
Okay. Nice. Okay, so we are good to go, right? Yeah. Okay, so we are now looking at the agents and actors of mis or disinformation. And I chose governments, and I am sure by now quite a number of people know that government at some point may engage in acts of mis or disinformation. In Ghana here, and I don't want to, it's something that both the current government and previous governments have engaged in over time. And I'm sure we have experiences where during elections, you would see government agents who would organize a press conference or organize tractors to a particular place to create the impression that they are going to construct a road or announce a road is going to be constructed here. They send tractors and everything there, machinery there to create the impression that these routes are going to be constructed. And immediately after the press conference is over, after the visit of the president is over, they take away these tractors, they just to deceive, create the impression as though they are going to really construct the road, when in actual fact, there are no plans. And I'm sure there are quite a number of examples we can cite about how governments all over the world, and this is not peculiar to the Ghana government, governments all over the world at some point engage in mis or disinformation. We also have the psychological operations, which most often is limited to the military environment or war situations, where people or the military guys send information out there as part of their psychological operations, just to either put fear in their opponents, okay? So they send, for instance, in the Russian and Ukraine war, there are lots of psychological operations going on, where at both ends, Russia and Ukraine are sending out information either to justify the action they have taken or to get global acceptance or global sympathy from the war. So psychological operations are mostly done within a war situation, especially by military operatives. And then political parties, need I say more? I'm sure we are well aware how potent political parties, especially in Ghana, engage in acts of mis and disinformation. And I'm sure we can cite as many examples where both NPP and MPP, in a bid to win power, will send out false information just so they can deceive their followers to either vote for them. So political parties also generally engage in acts of mis and disinformation. And then we talk about entrepreneurs. For having attended Accra Academy, I'm sure quite a number of people would understand. So for instance, you sit in a commercial vehicle from Circle to Kanishin, and then you have somebody selling a drug. That drug the person is coming to sell to passengers in the vehicle basically cures all manner of ailments. That same drug can cure malaria. That same drug can cure syphilis. Mention them. That entrepreneur or the businessman who is selling his drug is basically telling you that the piece of medicine he or she has can solve or cure whatever ailments you may have. That entrepreneur is engaging in a form of mis and disinformation just so you can buy the drug, when in actual fact, that drug may not be potent enough to solve, to cure the ailment he or she is talking about. And then we also have PR firms. PR firms are largely also in the business of mis and disinformation. There are copious examples in Ghana and in Colombia where you have established PR firms who go about their disinformation agenda, either to make one government or one political party popular or unpopular, okay? And then we have individuals. I'm sure when we come to the questions and answer sessions, if you want copious examples, I'm sure we can go through them as well. And then we have individuals and influencers. And this is so crucial for these agents. They deal with numbers. Okay, so if you have somebody who has a lot of following on social media, that person becomes an influencer, and they will channel their information through these influencers. So these influencers generally will become agents of mis and disinformation as well. And then the media, sometimes the media may engage in acts of mis or disinformation, sometimes deliberately and sometimes inadvertently. We have media houses sometimes aligned to political parties, and those are the dangerous ones, especially when they do not abide by the code of media ethics. If you have a media house that is aligned to a political party and that media house does not engage or does not apply itself to the ethics of the profession, that media house will engage in acts of disinformation just so it would win people over to the political parties they support. And that is also very, very dangerous. We also have the hate and extremist groups, and they also engage in lots and lots of misinformation. In Ghana here, we have examples of that. There are certain Facebook. Dubawa has engaged in investigations of some groups who are terribly engaged in hate speech. They send out information just so it would make other ethnic groups look bad, okay? And so there are agents like that who all they do is to spread out hate speech so that people will condescend or have ill feeling against one, either a religious group or an ethnic group. So what are the underlying motivations for these agents? Why do they do what they do? The first one we can talk about is financial, okay? People generally would want money for what they do, and sometimes they don't care the repercussions that may come out from it. So you have people who are paid to spread information. Some of this information may be false. They are agents of disinformation, and their motivation is just to earn money, okay? So people are paid to troll others. People are paid to manufacture stories against others just because there is a financial reward for them. So that would be one of the key motivations why these agents engage in what they do. Then we come to political power. Politicians are very interesting people. Sometimes it doesn't matter what they do, even if it means destroying the reputations of their opponents. If it means winning political party, they are ready to do that. I'm sure in Ghana, we have an example of a political party chairman who made a comment about even if it means ignoring or sacrificing the mother to win political power, he was ready to do that. I'm sure, I don't want to mention it, but that clue, I'm sure you would know exactly who I'm talking about. So you have people who would go at any length to spread whatever information there is. They know too well that that information is false, but just so they want to win political power, they will send those information out, okay? So political power is one underlying motivations why people send false information. Then we come to social and then psychological motivations. And this is also very important. There are people who would send out false information just because it makes them happy. The fact that they have fooled you, or the fact that they are the first to put a certain information out there, makes them happy, makes them proud. Okay, so these are some of the social reasons why people engage. I'm sure there could be other reasons for social benefits why people send out mis and disinformation. And then the psychological bit, a bit about the military example that I sent. People spread false information or engage in acts of mis or disinformation just so they would get the emotions of people, okay, so that they would manipulate the perceptions, opinions of people, so they would act in a way the agents want those people to act. Now, there's this that you would have to take pay attention to. These motivations vary from one agent to another. So, for instance, a politician who wants power will engage somebody, pay the person to spread false information about his opponent. That politician has his primary motivation to be power, political power. His primary motivation is political power. But the person who he has hired to spread that false information or to amplify that false information may not necessarily have his motivation to be political power. His motivation will be financial. Okay, so whether the person who paid him wins or not, he doesn't care. He's only concerned about his money. So you pay me, so I will do exactly what you have asked me to do. Whether you win or not, I don't care. My interest, my primary motivation is the money you are paying me to do exactly what you have asked of me. So you see that the motivations vary from one agent to the other, even if they are all engaged in the same campaign, okay? I hope that's clear. And then we come to the periods of heavy disinformation. Florence, I think this is about a good time to pause and find out if there are any answers to the question I asked. It's very important to this point of, at this part of the presentation. If there are answers, I'm sure we'll take the answers and then we'll go ahead. Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, Florence, I wanted to find out if there have been some answers for now. If not, we can just quickly go on.
Oh, there is no answer. I think we have questions rather, so we will take the questions at the end of the session.
At the end, okay, that's
yes,
fine.
Please.
That's fine. Okay, so I shared that particular question for good reasons. And should I go ahead or I should wait and see if there will be some answers? Other than that, let me just go ahead.
Okay, you go ahead. I'm sure there would be some answers, and especially when you are starting, people are just joining with connectivity issues. So I'm sure there will be some answers. You can also repeat the question and see if we have a lot of people online now, if they want to answer the question.
Okay, so maybe what I would do is just to repeat the question and then go ahead with the presentation, okay? So the question is, if you were to see this news item, the American Embassy is issuing free visa to Ghanaians on April 1, 2022 to consolidate bilateral relations between the two countries. What will you do and why? Okay, if you see this news item on a very credible website in Ghana, and this is the information they are churning out, what will be your action and why? That's the question at stake. I would love for you to give an answer. So this is the point where I'd wanted the answer to come. So I'll tie it in with this particular point of the presentation. But let me just go ahead. So for instance, the purpose of this presentation is to get everybody to be vigilant at every point in time. There could be potential message of disinformation anytime. So you just have to be vigilant, okay? But there are periods of heavy disinformation where you would have to be twice as vigilant than you would be in ordinary times, okay? There are periods where you have to be extra vigilant, because if you are not, you would realize that these unseen hands will be playing you for a fool. They will get you to act in ways that you are not aware about, but they will be reaping the benefits of their action when you have no idea what they are doing. And one such period where you'd have to be extra vigilant is during elections, okay? And during elections, that's where the political actors engage in lots and lots of disinformation. In 2016 here, in 2016 and 2020 elections in Ghana, we saw a good number of them. And in the US too, we saw a good number of acts of disinformation. I'm sure in the heat of the 2016, if I remember correctly, elections, we saw a video where it was said that the current president was taking a bribe, okay? And there was this video that was churned out by his political opponent. Parts of this video had been manipulated to suggest that indeed the sitting president was taking a bribe. So in periods of elections, there are heavy loads of messages of disinformation and misinformation, and people would have to be twice as vigilant in order not to let these actors or political actors have their way. And then in war and conflict situations, that's also periods where people engage in lots and lots of disinformation. You have the actors, the war actors, who probably want to seek global sympathy, or maybe they want to justify the actions that they have taken in the war. And so they churn out lots of information either to deceive and to ignite the emotions of people to support the actions that they have taken. And we have seen this a lot in the Russia and Ukraine war. Then we come to periods of pandemic, and I'm sure COVID-19 is such a good example of how people shared lots and lots of disinformation, either advertently or inadvertently. We have people who, because they did not like the vaccination, sent out false information or waged campaigns against vaccination, okay? And that's one example of disinformation. And during pandemics, a lot of these things happen. And so you would have to be twice as vigilant when we get into situations like that. Then we come to emergency and crisis situations. I'm sure in our next two slides, you would see how these actors operate, and they survive in areas or in situations where there's crisis, where there's confusion, where there's emergency, or where there is chaos. That's when they decide to churn out lots of disinformation. So in periods of crisis, you have to be twice as much vigilant as you were or as you have been in normal times. So we now come to the information disorder or fake news typology, okay? And as I said in previous slides, we have the experts in information ecosystem who divided this fake news into three. But there are 7 other ways where this fake news can be expressed. And we look into details of each of these typology, okay? How can you identify this information disorder, and in what ways are these information disorder expressed? One of them is to, and this is a diagram from First Draft, okay? And they have organize the fake news typology into 7 ways. And like I'm saying, these 7 ways are ways in which you can identify fake news or information disorder by these agents. One of them is a satire or parody. And in this instance, there is actually no intention to cause harm, but the primary objective there is to fool you. We have quite a number of examples where people spread information that is laughable, creates, lets people laugh, but there is a message across. The message is either to fool you or to take a particular decision. So even though the thing is laughable, the people behind it or the agents behind it are sending a message across. A typical example is one led by donkeys, a British group who did something about the former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, okay? They did a parody video about Boris Johnson accepting corruption charge, okay? And the video was so real. If you didn't know, you might think that this is actually what it is, that Boris Johnson has accepted guilt for allegations of corruption. And they did it so well. It's an example of deepfakes, which we would come to in a later presentation. But people use satire to cause mis or disinformation. We also have a misleading content where people will use information to frame an issue or an individual. And because we are in the World Cup season, let me give this typical example. So in the heat of our preparation, the Black Stars preparation towards the World Cup, there was a time where Coach Otuado was getting ready to name his squad, okay? Then from nowhere, we saw a message published on social media and even on some traditional media houses on their midday bulletins, where they said Sule Muntari has again apologized for his actions in the 2014 World Cup. Now, that particular, there was no such apology within the period or the time frame in which we were told he has apologized. That apology was somewhere in 2015, 2014, when the incident happened, okay? So just at the time where Otuado was coming to name his squad, an agent, through mischief and for whatever motivation, decides to throw this information out just so it will mislead people, it will create disaffection for Sule and create the impression that maybe Sule wants to be invited back into the national team. It was the time that he was playing for Accra Hearts of Oak, and some way, somehow, somebody sends that information out there. It was read on credible media houses as having happened, when indeed nothing like that occurred. So that content was completely misleading, and yet it was shared. We also have imposter content where people, because they lack that credibility, would want to get closer to institutions who have credibility and send their information or their disinformation through those institutions. So for instance, you have people who would deliberately design a website that looks like My John Online, CTFM Online, or Graphic Online, because those credible online platforms have over the years built credibility. People associate genuine information to those platforms. So these agents would somehow create websites that will seek to mimic or be similar to these websites, just so people would find the information they're credible. So if you are not vigilant and you read that information on those websites, which are really very similar to, and there was even one that was designed along the framework of BBC. You might think it is BBC that is sharing that information, but these are agents who have created websites that look similar to these credible websites, and they are churning out false information or disinformation and misinformation through those channels. Then we have fabricated content where the information they are sending out is completely false, but they want to deceive. And a typical example is the one I shared about the parody one, where the Led by Donkeys created this video suggesting that indeed the former UK Prime Minister had accepted guilt for acts of corruption, when nothing like that actually happened. It was just for satire, but people who didn't use the verification tools actually thought it was true, but this was fabricated by a parody account. There's also the false connection, where people use headlines or visuals or captions to support their content. So you have headlines that have nothing to do with the story. You can have Akufo-Addo has impregnated somebody. You read the story and it is not the Akufo-Addo you know. The person just used that sensational headlines just to attract attention and get the clickbait, so that people would read the content that he's sharing, and by so doing get lots of money from it. So that's the false connection we're talking about. There's also the false context, where people will share genuine content, but the context within which they have shared it is false. So for instance, on social media, there's this very popular picture where you have chairs in hospitals where pregnant women were being delivered on. And that same picture has been shared over and over again. And they will say it is either Kolebu Teaching Hospital. At some other period, you see that same picture and they will say it happened in Kenya and all that. So that picture is true, it happened, but people will share that picture and they would use it within a context that is actually false. So that's an example, a way where people use false context to spread disinformation. And then we have the manipulated content, where people genuine information or imagery is manipulated, like the example I gave of the bribery allegation against the sitting president. Then we come to the elements of information disorder. And this is very key. For every potential disinformation you see or read about, you have to know that there is an agent behind it. There is also the message that agent is sending across, and then that agent wants you to take an action. So this would become the elements of the information disorder. So it is always good as an active participant within the information ecosystem to know the agents who are behind the information that is shared. You understand the message they have sent across and the action they want you to take as a result of that message, okay? But it is not enough to know the agent. It is not enough. You have to dig deeper and understand a lot more nuances within those agents, those messages, and what they want you to do, okay? So for instance, the agent, like I said, it's not enough to know the agent by name. You have to understand, is this agent working for himself or he's representing a group? Is it personal or is it official? What is the level of organization? Is he working for a group that is really very tight, or is just working on his own? What are his or her motivation? Is it for money? Is it for power? Is it for social or psychological reasons? And then the level of automation, which I'm sure we would come to in our next couple of slides, is the person using humans to amplify his information, or he's using robots and cyborg, which is a combination of human and robots to amplify what he is sending across. And who are his intended audience? Is it for an entire group of people or for a specific group of people? You need to understand that. If you understand it, your action or your reaction to the information is sending would differ, okay? Is the agent intending to cause harm by the messages he's sending across, or it is just to mislead? Okay, then you come to the message itself. You need to understand the nuances of the message as well. Is the nuance, is the message just for short-term period? Maybe there's an election to be won. The political actors will send wrong information just so they win political power, and then that's it. After election is won, they are done. Or is it a perpetual message that has to do with hate speech? That person is sending information, disinformation out there, so you hate a particular ethnic group forever. You need to understand that. Is the information that is sending accurate? Is it misleading? Is it manipulated? Is it fabricated? Okay, is it also legal or illegal? When you understand that, how you react to that message will be different. So having looked at the agent and message, I said briefly that you should know that whatever potential disinformation you receive, the person wants you to take an action. The action you will take depends on your understanding of who the agent is, his motive for sending that information, and exactly what narrative he is sharing, okay? So when you understand the agent, you have done your own investigation and you understand what the person is about, your reaction would differ. If you did your investigation and you
I think we've lost Nathan. Whilst we, okay.
Am I back?
Yes, you are back. So you can reshare your slides and we can take it from there. Whilst Nathan is sharing his slides back, please post your questions online and let's read your questions. There are a few questions online. Someone answered the question. you posted, she said she will find out if the information is true before she will proceed with any other information. Another person also said, if there is free visa, why not jump on board, get the free visa? And yes, okay, you are back online. You're
Okay.
sharing your slides. Okay, so you go
So
to
is
the
it
last
showing?
button and there you share.
Okay. Is it showing now?
Yes, please. Thank
Okay.
you.
So I was on the interpretation. What does the agent want you to do with the message he or she is putting across? Okay. So if you do your initial investigation, you understand the agent, you understand the message across, he or she is putting across, then you are better placed to take action based on what you have investigated. So if you agree with what the agent is putting across, you become hegemonic. You agree with him. So in that case, if the agent is asking you to share that piece of information, you will share it because you agree with the agent. You believe that this information is not going to cause harm. This information is not going to misinform, deceive, or create any disharmony. So you will share. That's hegemonic. And that's the action you will take after you have done your own investigation. When it is oppositional, the action that you have taken is directly opposite to what the agent wants you to do. We say you are being oppositional, or your action is being oppositional to what the agent intends you to do. And that's after you have done your investigation. You have realized that this agent has ill motives. This agent wants to put across an information that is likely to create chaos. In that case, your reaction becomes oppositional and you would not share. You might even take an action of reporting that particular group to the authorities that be, so they take action. And when it is negotiated, what it means is that you have done your own investigation of the agent and then the message, and then you understand that, okay, there are bits and pieces of the information the person is sending out, which is true. There are others which are false. In that case, you understand it better, so you would know the rational line of action to take, so that at the end of the day, you would not misinform people. So like I said, when you do your investigation, the investigation will inform you the kind of action to take, either to ignore the message completely, either to share in support of the message, or to share in opposition, tell people not to believe this information because it is false. Now we look at the strategy for how the agents work. And like I said in the previous slides, these agents thrive when there is division. They thrive where there is chaos. And so they always look out for circumstances where there is chaos, so they strike. And one of the things they look out for is a divisive issue. In Ghana, there were periods where we had strong partisan division over the issue of e-levy. We also had the SIM card registration. Those are periods of chaos where people who want to misinform or disinform would quickly jump on such an opportunity to spread out false information just to carry people along the campaign they are waging. So the strategy of these agents, first and foremost, is to identify a divisive issue and then they strike. Once they identify that divisive issue, they create a narrative, they plan the campaign they want to use, and then they deploy. The next step they take is to build a following or hire one. So if you have an influencer who has a huge following, all they do is to get in touch with that influencer, pay the influencer some money, and that influencer will go about amplifying or distorting whatever they have created. And then there's one key issue that we need to understand. For social media, even though it's so important, it cannot be said to be as credible as mainstream media. For a huge number of people, they attach a lot of credibility to mainstream media. And so they would want to take things they read on this mainstream media very seriously as compared to social media. And so what these agents do is that they do not only want to amplify their messages within the social media arena where people are likely to look at these messages as not too credible. So what they do is they would want these messages to come or find its way into the mainstream media just so it will give it credibility. Can you imagine reading a false information on a credible website? You are likely to believe it just because this information is on a credible website. So what these agents do is that when they amplify and distort the information, they seek to push this information into the mainstream media so that there's a lot more believability and people will find it credible. And once that is the case, it takes a life of its own. In Kenya, there has been an example where people use this strategy to actually distort reality. They manufactured consent that something that was not really real. Through this strategy, they were able to make those issues real within the Kenyan election. So they distorted reality and they used this strategy to make that happen.
Okay, we are running out of time. I hope we have just one or two slides to go so that we can take so that we can take a question or two before we leave.
Okay, fine. So we have these tools and techniques. After we have looked at the strategies they use in getting their messages across, how do they really get, in what formats do they get these messages across? And one is through cheap fakes. Cheap fakes is a distortion of a video. So you'd have what people do a lot in the TikTok videos where you have somebody, they either make it, the messages fast or slow, they distort the video small, or sometimes even for cheap fakes, what they deep fakes, there's a small difference between cheap fakes and deep fakes. They are all video which is manipulated, but for deep fakes, what people do is to stitch people in videos where they did not take any role in at all. So for instance, we saw this video, this film, what's the title? I think Fast and Furious, where you have this Paul Walker, who died unfortunately, but we had him play a role in Fast and Furious 7. They use deepfakes, and what they do is through AI, artificial intelligence, or machine learning, they will be able to stitch people into roles where they did not play. And sometimes we have celebrities who are made to play roles in porn roles that they never played in, and that has reputational damage to some of these personalities. And these agents use deepfakes. And there's also the example of proxy or fake websites, which I have talked about. And there's coordinated inauthentic behavior. This is where these agents manipulate the information environment and create the impression that their campaign is probably the most important that we have to talk about. So you go to Twitter, you see some trendy issues and all that. Some of these issues are not authentic. Twitter and Facebook have a policy, they have standards. And if they see that these trending issues are coordinated and it's inauthentic, that is, sometimes you have accounts that are not real, fake accounts. You have bots or robots who are amplifying these messages so that it will create the impression that this is the most topical or this is the most important issue that is being discussed. You are engaging in
Yes, I think
coordinated,
that we need more
inauthentic.
time next time to be able to
Okay,
deep, take a deep dive into the tools and
into
techniques
this,
of
yeah.
misinformation and disinformation. I think that you have a lot to share, and I
Okay.
can understand that you have decades of experience, so you have a lot to share as well. We will make time for you to be able to do that. But just one question, because our time is up, and then we
Okay,
can wrap up.
okay.
And can satire be used for good? We've seen that, especially in the political realm, people have used different things like cartoons and other things to tell a story. Is it always for the bad of it, or it can also be used for the good of it? Or in other way, is it can misinformation or disinformation be a good thing in other areas?
Satires are generally, it depends on who is spreading that satire and the motivation behind it. So, for instance, we cannot do with that satire. It makes us laugh at some point. But you would see that people will spread a satire, but at the end of the day, the motivation behind that satire is to create disaffection for somebody. So a typical example is the example I cited with Boris Johnson. Even though it was a satire, it was to create the impression that this man was engaged in acts of corruption, which was not the case. So even though people laughed about it in the UK where it happened, people knew it was satire. But in Ghana here, not too many people knew it was satire. They believed it, and they felt that indeed Boris Johnson had engaged in acts of corruption, which is not good enough. So satires generally are good, but sometimes the motivation or the real reasons for some of these things can be suspect, and you need to be vigilant in order to understand the motivations behind some of the satires or information you receive.
Okay, so we need to be vigilant, like you've mentioned that we need to be vigilant in your slides several times. And I think that that's what brings us to the end of this session. And we are closing for a closing remark.